The first time I saw her, she was crying without sound. I'd been working at Kiro's for 3 months, long enough to know which tables tipped, which men touched without asking, and which nights ended with blood on the sidewalk outside. Long enough to stop flinching when the kitchen door slammed, or when Sal yelled my name across the dining room like I was deaf. But I'd never seen a child in here after midnight. She sat in the corner booth, the one with the ripped leather that no one liked because it faced the kitchen and you could hear everything. The shouting, the sizzle, the sharp crack of knives on cutting boards. Her hands were folded on the table. Small hands. Clean. Her dress was navy blue, expensive, the kind that didn't wrinkle even though she'd probably been sitting there for hours. And she was silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that made you want to hold your breath. I carried a tray of dirty glasses past her twice before I realized she wasn't waiting for anyone. No one sat across from her. No one checked on her. The men in the back corner, the ones in tailored suits who never ordered food, only whiskey, glanced at her every few minutes, but none of them approached. It felt wrong. I set the tray down behind the bar and wiped my hands on my apron. Sal was arguing with someone on the phone in his office, voice muffled through the thin walls. The dining room was nearly empty now. Just the girl, the men in suits, and an old regular named Enzo who came every night to drink alone. I walked over. "Hey," I said softly, crouching beside the booth so I wasn't towering over her. "Are you okay?" She looked at me. Her eyes were dark, almost black in the low light. There were tears on her cheeks, but her face was perfectly still. She didn't blink, didn't nod, didn't shake her head. I tried again. "Are you waiting for someone? Your mom? Your dad?" Nothing. My chest tightened. I glanced toward the men in the corner, but they were looking at their phones now, pretending not to notice. "Do you want some water?" I asked. The girl's lips parted slightly, like she was about to answer. But no sound came out. Her mouth moved, shaped the beginning of a word, and then, nothing. Just breath. I froze. She tried again. Her throat worked, her jaw tightened with effort, but there was no voice, not even a whisper. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice steady even though my pulse was racing. "Okay, that's okay." I didn't know what else to say. I reached into my apron pocket and pulled out the small notepad I used for orders. I set it on the table with a pen. "Can you write?" I asked gently. She stared at the paper for a long moment. Then, slowly, she picked up the pen. Her handwriting was careful, precise. "My name is Kiara." I exhaled. "Kiara. That's pretty." She wrote again. "I can't talk." "I can. See that," I said, and I tried to smile, tried to make it feel less terrifying. "But that's okay. You don't have to." She hesitated, then wrote one more line. "He's coming." The words sat there on the page, small and final. I looked up sharply. "Who's coming?" But she didn't write anything else. She just folded her hands again and stared at the door. And that's when I heard it. The sound of a car pulling up outside. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just deliberate. The kind of sound that made the air in the room change. The men in the corner stood up immediately, straightening their jackets, checking their watches. Enzo at the bar drained his glass and left 2 20s on the counter without asking for change. Even Sal's voice in the office went quiet. The door opened. I don't know what I expected. Maybe someone loud, someone who would fill the room with noise and movement. But the man who walked in was the opposite. He was tall, dressed in a black suit that fit him like it had been made on his body. His hair was dark, pushed back from his face, and his expression was empty. Not cold. Not angry. Just absent, like he'd learned how to stop feeling anything a long time ago. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. He walked straight to the booth, and Kiara stood up immediately, her movements small and automatic, like she'd done this 1,000 times before. He placed one hand on her shoulder, not rough, not gentle, just there, and turned to leave. "Wait," I said. I don't know why I said it. I don't know what I thought I could do, but the word came out before I could stop it, and the man paused. Slowly he turned his head, and for the first time he looked at me. His eyes were gray, pale, like winter light. They didn't blink, didn't soften. They just assessed, like he was deciding whether I was a problem or just a distraction. "She was crying," I said, and my voice sounded steadier than I felt. "I don't know if you noticed." The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator behind the bar. He didn't answer, didn't apologize, didn't explain. He just looked at me for 3 more seconds, long enough for me to feel the weight of it, the way his gaze pressed against my ribs. And then he turned away. Kiara glanced back at me once as they walked toward the door. Her face was still wet, still silent. And then they were gone. I stood there, holding the notepad with her name on it, my hands shaking. Sal came out of his office a minute later, saw me standing by the empty booth, and sighed. "Don't," he said. "Don't what?" "Don't ask. Don't get involved." He lit a cigarette, leaned against the bar. "You didn't see anything tonight." "Who was that?" I asked. Sal looked at me like I'd just asked him to jump off a bridge. "That," he said quietly, "was Luca Andretti." The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it, like it was a fact, like gravity, made my stomach twist. "And the girl?" I asked. Sal took a long drag, exhaled smoke toward the ceiling. "His daughter." I didn't sleep that night. I kept seeing her face, Kiara's, perfectly still except for the tears. Kept hearing the silence where her voice should have been. My apartment was small, just one room above a laundromat, and the machines ran until 3 in the morning. The vibration traveled through the floor, through the mattress, into my bones. Usually it helped. White noise, predictable. But tonight I just lay there, staring at the water stain on the ceiling, thinking about a child who couldn't speak and a father who didn't ask why she'd been crying. I got up at 6, made coffee, burned my toast, went to work early because there was nowhere else to go. Ciro's looked different in daylight, smaller. The red vinyl booths were cracked and faded, the floors scuffed gray from decades of feet. It smelled like bleach and old grease. Sal was already there, counting cash in the office with the door half open. He glanced up when I walked in, said nothing, went back to his money. I tied my apron, checked the salt shakers, wiped down tables that were already clean. At noon, the lunch rush started. Businessmen, tourists, a couple arguing in whispers over pasta they weren't eating. I moved through it mechanically. Orders, plates, checks, smiles that didn't reach my eyes. And then, at 1:30, the door opened. Kiara walked in alone. I froze mid-step, holding a tray of dirty dishes. She was wearing jeans today, a white sweater, small sneakers that looked too new. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She looked like any other kid, except for the way she moved. Careful, deliberate, like she was used to being watched. She walked straight to the same booth, sat down, folded her hands. I set the tray on the nearest table and crossed the room before I could think better of it. "Kiara," I said quietly, sliding into the seat across from her. She looked up. No surprise on her face, like she'd expected me to come. "Does your dad know you're here?" I asked. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a phone, expensive, sleek, and showed me the screen. A text conversation. "Luca, where are you?" "Kiara, Ciro's." "Luca, stay there." She put the phone away. I exhaled slowly. "Okay, So he knows. She nodded once. Do you want something to eat? I asked. She shook her head, then reached for my order pad, still in my apron pocket from last night. I handed it over along with a pen. She wrote, "Can I stay here for a while?" "Of course," I said, "as long as you need." She wrote again, hesitated, then turned the pad toward me. "You're not scared of him. It wasn't a question, just an observation." I thought about it. About Luca Andretti standing in this room last night, silent and immovable, looking at me like I was something small he could step over or erase. I don't know him well enough to be scared yet, I said honestly. Kiara's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. She wrote, "Most people are. Most people probably have good reason." She nodded seriously. I leaned back against the vinyl, studying her. She didn't look afraid. Didn't look trapped. She just looked tired. The kind of tired that lives in your bones, not your body. "How long?" I asked softly. She tilted her head, not understanding. "How long have you not been able to talk?" Her hand stilled on the notepad. For a moment I thought she wouldn't answer. Then she picked up the pen. 2 years, 4 months, 6 days. The precision of it hit me like a fist. "Jesus," I whispered. She wrote quickly. 21 doctors, speech therapy, psychiatrists, hypnosis, acupuncture. Nothing worked. "But nothing's physically wrong?" I asked. She shook her head. "Then why—" She underlined the last word she'd written. Nothing worked. Which wasn't the same as saying there was no reason. Just that no one had found it yet. Or maybe that she didn't want it found. I was about to ask something else, something stupid and intrusive that I had no right to. But the door opened again. This time I felt him before I saw him. Luca Andretti stepped inside, and the temperature in the room dropped. He wasn't doing anything, wasn't threatening anyone. But every conversation paused. Every head turned slightly, just enough to acknowledge his presence without making eye contact. He crossed the dining room in 5 strides, stopped at our booth. Kiara stood immediately. Luca looked at her first. A long, assessing look that might have been concern, or might have been inventory. Then his eyes shifted to me. "She bothering you?" he asked. His voice was quiet, almost polite, but there was no warmth in it, no inflection at all. "No," I said. "She's not." "Good." He turned to leave, one hand resting lightly on Kiara's shoulder. "Wait," I said again, stupid, reckless, but I couldn't stop myself. Luca paused, didn't turn around. "She's welcome here," I said. "Anytime, if she wants." Silence stretched between us like a wire. Then slowly, he looked back. His expression hadn't changed. Still empty, still unreadable. "You don't know what you're offering," he said. "Maybe not," I admitted. "But I'm offering it anyway." Something flickered in his eyes. Not warmth, not gratitude, just recognition. Like I'd said something he hadn't expected, and now he had to recalculate. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elena." He repeated it once, testing the shape of it. Then he nodded. Once, barely perceptible, and guided Kiara toward the door. But before they left, Kiara turned back. She pressed her hand to her chest, then extended it toward me. "Thank you." I nodded. And then they were gone. Sal appeared beside me 30 seconds later, arms crossed, cigarette dangling from his mouth. "You're an idiot," he said. "Probably." "He's not a good man, Elena." "I know." "No," Sal said, turning to look at me. "You don't." But he didn't stop me from clearing Kiara's booth. Didn't stop me from folding the notepad page with her handwriting and slipping it into my pocket. Didn't stop me from hoping she'd come back. Kiara came back 3 days later. This time she brought a book. Thick, hard cover, the kind with gilt edges and a ribbon bookmark. She sat in her booth, the one I'd started thinking of as hers, and read without looking up. I brought her lemonade without asking. She wrote thank you on a napkin and went back to her book. She stayed for 2 hours. Luca didn't come. No one else did either. She just sat there, turning pages in the afternoon light that came through the window. And for some reason, it felt like the most normal thing in the world. The next week, she came 4 times. Always alone. Always to the same booth. Sometimes she read. Sometimes she drew in a sketchbook. Quick, precise lines that became faces, buildings, hands. Once she fell asleep with her cheek against the table, and I didn't wake her. Just made sure no one sat nearby, kept the noise down, let her rest. When she finally stirred, blinking slowly, she looked disoriented. Scared almost. Until she saw me wiping down the next table, and something in her face softened. She wrote, I dreamed I was somewhere else. Good somewhere or bad somewhere? I asked. She thought about it, then wrote, just different. I nodded like I understood, even though I wasn't sure I did. On the 5th visit, she brought the sketchbook over to the bar where I was rolling silverware and turned it toward me. It was a drawing of the restaurant, but not as it was, as it could be. The booths were still there, but the walls were painted warm gold instead of institutional beige. There were plants in the windows, real ones, hanging and trailing. The light fixtures were different, softer, like something from an old movie. This is beautiful, I said. She wrote, it's how I see it when I'm here. Something in my chest tightened. Better than it is. She shook her head quickly and wrote, safe. I set down the silverware. You feel safe here? She nodded. Why? I asked quietly. She hesitated, pen hovering over the page. Then she wrote 3 words. Because you're here. I didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know how to carry the weight of it. So I just reached across the bar and squeezed her hand once, quickly, and went back to rolling forks into napkins. It was a Tuesday night, almost closing time, when Luca came in alone. No suits, no entourage, just him, in dark jeans and a black shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. He looked, not smaller, exactly, but less like a wall, more like a man. He sat at the bar instead of a booth. I was wiping down the espresso machine, and I felt him sit down the way you feel. Storm coming. A change in pressure. Coffee? I asked without turning around. Whiskey. Neat. I poured it, set the glass in front of him, and went back to cleaning. He didn't drink right away, just stared at the glass like it contained an answer to a question he hadn't asked yet. She talks about you, he said finally. I paused mid-wipe. She can't talk. She writes about you. His voice was flat, factual. In her journal, on her phone. You're the only person outside our family she mentions. I didn't know what to do with that information. She seems like a good kid, I said carefully. She is. Silence settled between us. I kept cleaning, even though the machine was already spotless. Why does she come here? He asked. She hasn't told you? I don't read her journal. I don't check her phone. He finally lifted the glass, took a slow sip. I just know that she leaves the house, somewhere she's protected, where no one can touch her, and comes to a restaurant in a neighborhood I own, to sit alone for hours. She's not alone, I said. I'm here. His eyes lifted to mine, gray and unreadable. You don't know me, he said. You don't know what I do, what I've done, and you're not afraid. Should I be? Yes. The word was simple. Honest. I set down the rag and leaned against the bar, meeting his gaze. Your daughter is safe here. That's all that matters. Is it? He tilted his head slightly, studying me like I was a problem he couldn't solve. You think safety is simple, You think you can offer it like coffee. I think she needed somewhere to go, I said. And I think you know that. Or you wouldn't let her keep coming back. Something shifted in his expression. Not softness. Luca Andretti didn't do soft. But something closer to acknowledgement. 21 doctors, he said quietly. Do you know what it's like to watch your child try to speak and produce nothing? To see her cry because she can't tell you what's wrong? My throat tightened. No. The last doctor said it was psychological. Selective mutism triggered by trauma. He finished his whiskey in one swallow. But she won't tell anyone what happened. Won't write it. Won't even acknowledge that something did. Maybe she's not ready, I said. It's been 2 years. Maybe she needs more time. He laughed, short, bitter, barely a sound. Time, as if I have that to give. I didn't understand what he meant, didn't ask. Instead, I poured him another whiskey without asking if he wanted it. He looked at the glass for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, plain white, just a phone number embossed in black. He slid it across the bar toward me. If she ever tells you, he said quietly. What happened? Why she stopped talking? You call me. Why would she tell me? His eyes held mine, and for the first time, I saw something human in them. Something that looked like fear. Because you're the only person she trusts, he said. Then he stood, left $200 bills on the bar, and walked out into the night. I stood there holding his card, my hands shaking, and I realized I'd just been given a key to something dangerous. The card stayed in my apron pocket for a week. I felt it every time I reached for my order pad, a small, sharp corner pressing against my hip. A reminder. A weight. Kiara came in almost every day now. Sometimes in the afternoon, sometimes just before closing. She brought homework once and sat frowning at algebra until I slid into the booth across from her and helped her work through the problems. She brought her sketchbook again and drew my hands while I folded napkins. She brought nothing at all and just sat, breathing, existing in a space that asked nothing of her. We developed a rhythm, a language without words. One raised eyebrow from me meant you okay? A small nod from her meant yes. A tilted head meant stay close. And I did. But something was changing. I felt it the way you feel a hairline fracture in ice, invisible until you put weight on it. It started with the men. Not Luca's men. I recognized those now, the ones in good suits who came in for espresso and never touched their phones. These were different. They sat near the windows, ordered food they didn't eat. Their eyes followed Kiara every time she moved. I asked Sal about it on a Thursday night after we'd closed. They're not ours, he said, locking the register. Which means they're someone else's. Someone else's what? He looked at me like I was a child who'd asked why the sky was blue. Someone who wants to know what Luca Andretti's daughter does with her time, who she talks to. She doesn't talk to anyone. She talks to you. The words sat between us, heavy and undeniable. I'm nobody, I said. That's what makes it interesting. Sal pulled his coat on, headed for the door. You're a variable. Variables make people nervous. What people? But he was already gone. Kiara came in the next afternoon with a bruise on her wrist. Small, greenish yellow, shaped like fingers. She saw me notice and pulled her sleeve down quickly, but not quickly enough. I brought her lemonade and sat down without asking. Who hurt you? I said quietly. She shook her head. Kiara. She reached for the notepad, hesitated, then wrote, It's nothing. That's not nothing. She underlined the words, more firmly this time. It's nothing. But her hand was shaking. I wanted to push, wanted to demand answers, wanted to call the number on the card, burning a hole in my pocket. Instead, I just sat there, keeping my voice level. If someone's hurting you, I said, you can tell me. You know that, right? She wouldn't look at me. You don't have to protect anyone, I continued. Not even your father. Her head snapped up, eyes sharp with something that looked like panic. She grabbed the pen and wrote fast, messy. It's not him. Okay, I said. Okay, I believe you. She wrote again. He would never. The certainty in those words, the absolute unshakable faith made my chest ache. Then who? I asked. She just shook her head and closed the notepad. We sat in silence for 10 minutes. I didn't leave, didn't try to fill the quiet, just stayed. Finally, she wrote one more line and turned it toward me. Do you have a family? The question caught me off guard. No, I said. Not really. Parents? Gone. A long time ago. Siblings? A brother. I haven't seen him in 5 years. She studied my face, and I realized this was the first time I'd told her anything real about myself. The first time I'd been anything other than the waitress who gave her space. Do you miss him? She wrote. Every day, I admitted. But sometimes people leave and you can't follow them. She looked down at her wrist, at the bruise she was trying to hide. Sometimes they don't leave, she wrote. They just stop being who they were. Before I could respond, the door opened. Not Luca this time. A woman. Tall, sharp-featured, wearing a cream coat that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. Her hair was dark, swept back into a perfect chignon. Her heels clicked against the floor like a metronome. Chiara went rigid. The woman walked straight to our booth, didn't acknowledge me, and looked down at Chiara with an expression I couldn't read. Not anger, not warmth. Something carefully blank. Your father wants you home, she said. Her voice was smooth, cultured, empty. Chiara stood immediately, gathering her things with mechanical precision. Wait, I said, standing too. Who are you? The woman finally looked at me. Her eyes were the same gray as Luca's, but colder, sharper. Valentina Andretti, she said. Luca's sister. Of course. The resemblance was there in the bone structure, the stillness. Chiara was just... I know what she was doing. Valentina's gaze flicked to Chiara, then back to me. My brother has indulged this, but you should understand something. She stepped closer, and I smelled expensive perfume, jasmine and something darker. Chiara is not your responsibility, Valentina said quietly. She's not your project. And whatever you think you're building here, this little sanctuary, it won't protect her when things get complicated. Complicated how? Valentina smiled, thin and precise. You're already being watched. Did you notice? The men by the window last week. The car that parks across the street when she's here. They're not ours. My stomach dropped. Then who's... People who think a speechless child might be vulnerable. Useful. People who want to know if Luca Andretti has weaknesses. She glanced at Chiara, something almost soft crossing her face. You've made her visible. I hope you understand what that means. Chiara was staring at the floor, hands clenched around her sketchbook. Valentina touched her shoulder, gentle, but firm. Come on, Chiara. They left together. Chiara didn't look back. I stood there in the empty restaurant, heart pounding, and pulled the card from my pocket. Just a phone number. No name. I stared at it for a long time. Then I put it back and tried to convince myself I'd done the right thing by staying silent. I didn't believe it. Chiara didn't come back for 4 days. I counted them, marked them in my head like tally marks on a cell wall. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Each shift I watched the door, watched the booth, and felt the absence like a missing tooth, something small you couldn't stop touching with your tongue. On Sunday, Luca came instead. It was early, barely past opening. I was still setting up, filling salt shakers in the empty dining room. The door opened and I knew without looking who it was. You couldn't mistake the way the air changed when he entered a space. "She's not here," I said, not turning around. "I know." I looked up. He was standing by the door, hands in his pockets, and for the first time since I'd met him, he looked uncertain, not afraid. Luca Andretti didn't do afraid, but something close to it. "Is she okay?" I asked. "That depends on your definition." I set down the salt shaker. "Is she hurt? No? Is she safe?" He crossed the room slowly, stopped at the bar. "For now." "What does that mean?" He was quiet for a long moment, studying the bottles on the shelf behind me like they contained instructions. Then, "My sister was right. You've made Kiara visible, and visibility, in my world, is dangerous." "I didn't mean to. I know." He cut me off, but his voice wasn't sharp. Just tired. "You were kind, that's all. But kindness has consequences you don't understand. Then explain them to me." He smiled, but there was no humor in it. "How much do you know about what I do?" "I know you're not a businessman." "No." "I know people are afraid of you." "Yes." "And I know someone hurt your daughter badly enough that she stopped speaking." Something flickered across his face, quick, like lightning, gone before I could name it. "What I do," he said carefully, "requires control. Absolute control. Over territory. Over people. Over information." He paused. "Over emotion. And Kiara is the only thing I can't control." The admission seemed to cost him something, which makes her the only leverage anyone has against me. I felt cold suddenly, despite the warm kitchen air drifting through the pass-through. "Someone tried to take her," he said quietly. 3 years ago. She was 9. They held her for 16 hours before we found her." My hand went to my mouth. "They didn't hurt her," he continued, each word precise and deliberate. "Not physically, but when we got her back, she wouldn't speak. Hasn't spoken since." "Jesus," I whispered. 21 doctors, he said, echoing what he'd told me before. None of them could tell me what happened in those 16 hours. What they said to her. What they showed her. She won't write it. Won't even acknowledge it. Maybe she can't. Or maybe she's protecting me from something I'll do when I find out. The implication hung between us like smoke. I leaned against the bar, trying to steady myself. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because the men watching this restaurant aren't tourists." His eyes met mine, and they were empty again. Carefully, deliberately empty. "They're associated with the Volkov family. Russians. They've been expanding into my territory for months, testing boundaries. What do they want with Kiara?" "What everyone wants. Leverage. Information. Proof that I can be hurt." He pulled out his phone, showed me a photo. "This was taken yesterday. It was me. Walking home from work, keys in my hand, head down against the cold. The angle suggested someone across the street. Someone patient. My blood turned to ice water." "They know you matter to her," Luca said, putting the phone away. "Which means you matter to me, which makes you a problem." "I'll stop," I said quickly. "I'll tell her not to come anymore. Too late." He said it without emotion, like stating a fact. "They've already decided you're interesting, and the Volkovs don't lose interest easily." I tried to swallow. Couldn't. "So what happens now?" He was quiet for a moment, then, "You come with me." "What?" "Until this is resolved, you stay somewhere they can't reach you. Somewhere I control completely." "You want me to just leave? My job? My apartment?" "Sal already knows. He'll hold your position." Of course Sal knew. Sal always knew. "And if I say no?" I asked. Luca's expression didn't change. then the next photo they take might be at a different angle. Closer, and they won't just watch. Fear moved through me like cold water, but underneath it was something else. Something that felt like anger. "You brought this to my door," I said. "Yes." "By letting Kiara come here." "Yes. And now I don't have a choice." "No." He held my gaze. "But neither do I." 20 minutes later, I was in the back of a black car with tinted windows, a bag of hastily packed clothes at my feet. Luca sat across from me, silent, checking his phone. The driver said nothing. We drove through parts of the city I didn't recognize. Old neighborhoods with narrow streets, gated properties. Finally, we turned into a long driveway flanked by stone walls and iron gates that opened automatically. The house was not what I expected. Big, yes. Expensive, obviously. But not cold. Not sterile. There were gardens, trees, warm lights in the windows that made it look almost normal. Almost. The car stopped. Luca opened my door. "How long?" I asked, not moving. "I don't know. Days? Weeks? However long it takes." I got out slowly, feeling like I was stepping off a cliff in the dark. The front door opened before we reached it, and Kiara stood there in pajamas and bare feet, eyes wide. When she saw me, something in her face broke open. Relief, maybe. Or hope. She ran down the steps and threw her arms around me, holding on like I was the only solid thing in the world. I hugged her back, looked over her head at Luca. He was watching us with that carefully empty expression, but his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. The house was full of quiet. Not the tense, fragile quiet of Kiro's late at night, when danger felt like a neighbor sitting just out of sight. This was different. Thicker. The kind of quiet that came from high ceilings and heavy doors, and people who'd learned not to speak unless they had something worth saying. Kiara led me upstairs, still holding my hand. Her palm was warm, slightly damp. Nervous. My room was at the end of a long hallway. Pale blue walls, a 4-poster bed with white linens, windows that overlooked the garden. There was a bathroom attached, towels already laid out. A vase of fresh flowers on the dresser. It looked like a room in a boutique hotel. Impersonal. Expensive. Safe. Kiara sat on the edge of the bed while I set down my bag. She pulled out her phone and typed quickly. "Kiara, you're really staying?" I sat beside her. "For a little while." "Kiara, I'm sorry." "Hey." I turned to face her. "This isn't your fault." She shook her head, typed again. "Because of me, you're in danger." "Because of some very bad people," I corrected. "Not because of you." But she didn't look convinced. She stared at her hands, at the bruise on her wrist that had faded to pale yellow. I took a chance. "Kiara, the bruise. Who did that?" She went very still. "Was it someone here?" I asked gently. "In this house?" She shook her head quickly. "Someone at school?" Another shake. "One of the men your father works with?" She looked up at me, and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Not fear, shame. Slowly, she typed, "I did it." I blinked. "What?" "Kiara." I grabbed my own wrist. Too hard, during a nightmare. "Oh, sweetheart." I didn't think, just pulled her close. She resisted for half a second, then collapsed against me, face pressed to my shoulder. We sat like that for a long time. Her breathing eventually slowed, steadied. When she pulled back, her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. She'd cried without making a sound, the way she did everything. She typed, "Do you ever wish you could disappear?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "When I was younger. When things were hard." "Kiara, what stopped you?" I thought about it. About the years after my parents died. After my brother left. When I'd felt so alone, I sometimes forgot what my own voice sounded like. "I guess I realized disappearing wouldn't fix anything," I said. It would just make me invisible to the people who might actually see me. She stared at the words, then typed, "What if being invisible is safer?" Maybe, but it's also lonelier. She didn't respond, just saved my number in her phone and went to her own room across the hall. I didn't see Luca for the rest of that day. Valentina came by in the evening, still sharp, still perfect, but marginally less hostile. She showed me where things were: the kitchen, the library, the garden doors. "Don't leave the property," she said. It wasn't a request. I wasn't planning to. She studied me with those cold gray eyes. "You care about her?" "Yes." "Why?" The question surprised me. Does there need to be a reason? In this family? Always. She turned to leave, then paused. "My brother doesn't trust easily, but he trusts you with Chiara. Don't make him regret it." "I won't." She nodded once and left, heels clicking down the marble hallway. At midnight, I gave up trying to sleep. The bed was too soft, the room too quiet. I kept thinking about the photo of me, the angle, the patience it required. Someone watching, waiting, deciding if I was worth the risk. I pulled on a sweater and wandered downstairs. The house was dark except for a light coming from a room near the back. I followed it and found a study, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk, leather chairs that looked 100 years old. Luca sat behind the desk, reading something on his laptop. He'd changed into a black t-shirt, and without the suit jacket he looked younger, less like a wall and more like a man carrying weight he couldn't set down. "Can't sleep?" he asked without looking up. "Your house is too quiet." "Most people find that peaceful." "I'm used to laundromats and police sirens." He almost smiled. Almost. I stepped into the room, looked at the bookshelves. Philosophy, history, poetry. Not what I'd expected. "You read Rilke?" I asked, pulling out a worn volume. "My wife did." The past tense hit me like a slap. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was a long time ago." He closed the laptop, leaned back in his chair. "Chiara was 4. I didn't know what to say. Didn't know if there was anything to say. "She had cancer," he continued, voice flat. "Fast. Aggressive. 6 months from diagnosis to—" He trailed off. "Chiara doesn't remember her well. Just fragments. The way she smelled. The songs she sang." "Is that why you have the book?" "I keep things she touched." He said it simply, like it was obvious. "So Chiara has something physical. Something real." I set the book down carefully. "You're a better father than you think." His eyes snapped to mine. "You don't know what kind of father I am. I know Chiara feels safe with you. I know she protects you even when she's hurting. That doesn't come from fear." "It should." His voice dropped. "Everything I've built, everything I am, is soaked in blood, Elena. I've hurt people, killed people, made decisions that would keep you awake at night. Probably. And you're not afraid?" I thought about it, really thought. "I'm afraid of the men watching my apartment," I said slowly. "I'm afraid of what happens if they get to Chiara. But you?" I shook my head. "No." "Why not?" "Because you brought me here. You could have just increased security, paid someone to watch me. But you brought me somewhere you could protect me yourself." I met his gaze. "That's not something a monster does." He stared at me for a long moment, and for the first time, the careful emptiness in his eyes cracked. What I saw underneath wasn't soft, but it was human. "Get some sleep, Elena," he said quietly. I left him there, alone with his dead wife's books. 3 days passed like water through fingers. I fell into a rhythm I didn't expect. Mornings in the garden with Chiara, where she drew and I read. Afternoons in the kitchen, learning to make pasta from Maria. the housekeeper who'd worked for the family for 20 years and spoke more with her hands than her mouth. Evenings in the library, sometimes alone, sometimes with Kiara doing homework at the big oak table. Luca was a ghost. Present, but not. I'd see him leaving early, returning late. Hear his voice through closed doors, speaking in Italian too rapid for me to follow. Once I passed his study at 2 in the morning and saw him standing at the window, perfectly still, like a statue forgetting how to be stone. We didn't speak, but I felt him. The weight of his attention. The way the house seemed to breathe differently when he was in it. On the 4th morning, Kiara came to breakfast with something new in her face. Determination, maybe. Or fear shaped like courage. She sat across from me, pushed away her untouched eggs, and typed on her phone for a long time. When she turned it toward me, my heart stopped. Kiara, I want to tell you what happened when they took me. My coffee went cold in my hands. You don't have to, I said carefully. Kiara, I know, but I want to. Does your father know you're... Kiara, no. And I'm not ready to tell him. Just you. I set down my cup. Okay? I'm listening. She stared at her phone, fingers hovering over the screen. It took her 5 full minutes to start typing. When she did, the words came slowly, painfully. Kiara, they didn't hurt me, not the way people think. No one touched me. No one hit me. Kiara, they just talked. Kiara, for 16 hours they talked. She paused, deleted something, started again. Kiara, they told me everything my father had done. Every person he'd killed. Every family he'd destroyed. They had photos, documents, recordings. Kiara, they told me the man who tucked me in at night had put a bullet in someone's father, someone's brother, someone's child. My throat closed. Kiara, they said if I loved him, I was just as guilty. That his blood was on my hands too. Kiara, they asked me if I could still sleep at night knowing what he was. Kiara, and I couldn't answer, because I didn't know. She stopped typing. Her hands were shaking. Kiara, when he found me, when he came through that door, I looked at him and all I could see was the man they'd described. The monster. Kiara. And I couldn't speak, because I didn't know if I was greeting my father or his ghost. Tears were streaming down her face now, silent and relentless. Kiara, I still don't know. Every day I look at him and I love him and I'm terrified of him and I can't say any of it out loud because if I do, it makes it real. I moved around the table and pulled her into my arms. She shook against me, sobbing without sound, and I held her like she was the only thing keeping me anchored to the earth. Listen to me, I whispered into her hair. What he's done, that's his to carry, not yours. You don't inherit someone's sins just by loving them. She pulled back, shook her head, typed frantically. But how do I love someone who's done terrible things? The same way he loves you, I said, completely, without conditions, even when it's complicated. Kiara, is that enough? I don't know, I admitted, but it's all any of us have. She stared at me, then typed one more line. Will you tell him? I thought about the card in my pocket, the number I'd never called. Do you want me to? Kiara, I don't know. Then I won't. Not until you're ready. She nodded, wiped her face with her sleeve, and we sat there in the morning light, holding a secret between us like broken glass. Luca came home early that afternoon. I was in the garden, deadheading roses that didn't need it, when I heard his voice behind me. Where's Kiara? I turned. He looked exhausted. Shadows under his eyes. Tension in his jaw. Music lesson, I said. Valentina took her. He nodded absently, started to leave. Luca. He stopped. How long are we doing this? I asked. Hiding? Until it's safe. And when will that be? When the Volkovs are no longer a problem. Which means... He turned to face me fully, and there was something dangerous in his eyes. You don't want that answer. Yes, I do. No, Elena. You don't. He stepped closer. You want to believe I'm a good man doing bad things for good reasons. You want to believe there's a line I won't cross. But there isn't. When it comes to Kiara, there isn't anything I won't do. I know that. Do you? His voice dropped. Because if you did, you'd be afraid. You'd see me the way everyone else does. Maybe everyone else doesn't know you. He laughed, sharp, bitter. And you do? I know you read poetry your dead wife loved. I know you let your daughter come to a restaurant where she felt safe, even though it made her visible. I know you brought a stranger into your home because you thought she might help. I stepped closer. So yes, maybe I know you better than you think. Something shifted in his face. The careful control slipped, just for a moment, and what I saw underneath was raw, wounded. She told you, he said quietly, about what happened. I went cold. How did you... Because you're looking at me differently. His eyes held mine. Everyone does, after they know. She's carrying your guilt, I said. And it's breaking her. I know. Then fix it. How? The word came out jagged. How do I fix loving someone in a world that punishes love? I didn't have an answer. He turned away. The Volkovs made contact. They want a meeting. What does that mean? It means this ends soon, one way or another. And then he was gone, leaving me alone with roses and the taste of something bitter. The meeting was set for midnight at a warehouse near the port. I knew because I heard Luca on the phone, speaking in clipped Italian, his voice stripped of everything except command. I knew because Valentina came to the house at 10 and didn't bother hiding the gun at her hip. I knew because Kiara sat at the top of the stairs, watching her father prepare to leave, and the fear on her face was the loudest thing in the silent house. Luca saw her there, stopped at the bottom of the stairs. Go to bed, Piccola, he said softly. She shook her head. It's just a conversation. She pulled out her phone, typed, showed him. Don't lie to me. His jaw tightened. He climbed the stairs slowly, crouched in front of her. For a moment, he just looked at her, this small, silent girl who carried too much. I'll come back, he said. Kiara, you don't know that. I do. Kiara, promise. He hesitated, and I realized with a chill that he couldn't. That he was walking into something with no guaranteed exit, and he wouldn't insult her with false certainty. Instead, he kissed her forehead. I love you more than anything in this world. And then he left. Valentina followed. The front door closed. Engines started. Gravel crunched under tires. Kiara and I were alone in the enormous, quiet house. She came down the stairs slowly and collapsed onto the couch beside me. I put my arm around her. We sat there, not speaking, watching the clock. 11:30. Midnight. 12:30. At 1 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. Hello? Breathing. Just breathing. Then a voice. Male. Accented. Cold. You're the waitress. My blood turned to ice. Who is this? The girl is there with you, yes? Luca's daughter. I looked at Kiara. She was staring at me, eyes wide. I don't know what you're... Don't. The word cracked like a whip. We know where you are. We know you're alone. And we know Luca Andretti is currently... occupied. My hand tightened on the phone. What do you want? Put the girl on. No. Then I'll have to come inside and get her myself. The line went dead. I was on my feet instantly, grabbing Kiara's hand. Upstairs. Now. She didn't argue, didn't ask questions. We ran. Luca's study. 3rd floor. Solid oak door with a lock. I shoved her inside, locked it behind us, dragged a heavy chair in front of it. Kiara was typing frantically. What's happening? Someone's coming. I pulled out my phone, dialed the number on Luca's card. It rang, and rang. No answer. I tried Valentina. Same thing. Kiara grabbed my arm, pointed to the window. Below, in the driveway, headlights. 2 cars. Black. 4 men getting out. Not rushing. Just walking toward the house like they had all the time in the world. I looked around the study desperately. Luca's desk. I yanked open drawers. Files. Pens. A checkbook. Bottom drawer. Locked. I grabbed a letter opener and jammed it into the lock, prying. The wood splintered. The drawer opened. Inside, a gun. Black. Heavy. Real. I'd never held one before. Never wanted to. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. Kiara's eyes were huge. She shook her head frantically. I won't use it unless I have to, I whispered. Downstairs, glass shattered. They were inside. Footsteps. Slow. Methodical. They weren't hiding, weren't hurrying. They knew we were trapped. I turned off the lights, pulled Kiara behind the desk with me. We crouched there in the darkness, my arms around her, the gun in my hand feeling like a live animal. The footsteps came up the stairs. 1 floor, 2. They were on the 3rd floor now. Doors opening, closing, getting closer. Kiara was trembling against me, silent tears on her face. The study door handle turned, rattled. Someone pushed against it. The chair scraped forward an inch. Little girl, a voice called. Russian accent. Almost friendly. We just want to talk, like we did before. Kiara went rigid in my arms. Your father killed 3 of my brothers tonight, the voice continued. So I think it's only fair I take something from him, yes? Another push. The chair scraped further. My finger found the trigger. Come out, and the waitress doesn't get hurt. The door crashed open. The chair fell sideways. A man stepped into the room, tall, broad, holding a gun of his own. He saw us behind the desk and smiled. There you are. I raised the gun. Get out. He laughed. You don't even know how to hold that. Try me. He took a step forward. I fired. The sound was deafening. The recoil nearly broke my wrist. The bullet went wide, punched through the bookshelf behind him, but it stopped him. For 3 seconds, we stared at each other. Then I heard it. Tires on gravel. Doors slamming. Voices shouting in Italian. The man's face changed. He swore, turned, ran. Footsteps pounding down the stairs. Car engines starting. More shouting. Then silence. I was still pointing the gun at empty air, shaking so hard I couldn't breathe. Kiara's hands closed over mine, gently pushing the gun down. The door crashed open again. I raised the gun. Elena! Luca. He was bleeding, left shoulder, seeping through his shirt. His face was white. Behind him, Valentina, also bloodied but upright. He saw us, saw the gun, saw the terror on Kiara's face. He crossed the room in 3 strides, pulled Kiara into his arms, held her like she was the only real thing in the world. Then he looked at me over her head. You fired, he said. I missed. You stayed. I couldn't speak, could only nod. He closed his eyes, pressed his face into Kiara's hair, and I saw his shoulders shake, not from pain, from something much worse, relief. The house was silent again, but a different kind of silent. The silence after a storm, after violence, after the moment when you realize you're still breathing and don't know if you should be grateful or guilty. Luca sat on the edge of the bathtub in his bathroom while Valentina stitched his shoulder. He didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just stared at the tile floor like it held answers. Kiara had finally fallen asleep in my bed, curled into a tight ball, her phone clutched in one hand. I'd sat with her for an hour, stroking her hair until her breathing evened out. Now I stood in the doorway of Luca's bathroom, watching needle pull through skin. "The Volkovs?" I asked quietly. "Not a problem anymore," Valentina said without looking up. Her hands were steady, practiced. All of them. The ones that mattered. She tied off the thread, snipped it clean. "The rest will fall in line or scatter. They always do." Luca finally looked up at me. His eyes were different. Emptier than usual. Or maybe fuller. I couldn't tell. "You should have run," he said. "Where?" "Anywhere. The garden, the woods. You could have gotten her out." "They were already inside." "You could have tried." "I did try," I said. "I tried calling you. And when that didn't work, I found your gun and I stayed." Valentina stood, gathered her supplies. She paused beside me. 16 years I've known him. First time I've seen him scared. She left, closing the door behind her. Luca stood slowly, crossed to the sink, washed the blood from his hands. His movements were mechanical, distant. "I killed 4 men tonight," he said to his reflection. "Shot 2, strangled 1. The 4th doesn't matter." "How?" He turned to face me. "That's who I am. That's what I do when someone threatens what's mine." "I know. You should be horrified." "I am." "Then why are you still here?" I moved into the room, leaned against the counter beside him. "Because Kiara needs someone who isn't afraid. And because..." I paused, trying to find words for something I didn't fully understand myself. "Because I think you've been alone with this for so long you've forgotten what it's like to have someone stay." His jaw tightened. "Elena?" "I'm not asking you to be someone else," I interrupted. "I'm not asking you to stop being what you are. I took a breath. I'm choosing to stay. That's all. I'm choosing it." "Why?" "Because she told me what they did to her. What they said. And I saw what it did to both of you. How it broke her voice and your heart and left you both trapped in silence." I met his eyes. Someone has to choose to break that silence. Might as well be me. He stared at me for a long moment. Then slowly he reached out and touched my face. Just his fingertips against my jaw, feather-light, like he was afraid I'd disappear. "You fired a gun tonight," he said softly. "I did." "For her?" "Yes." "You could have died." "So could you." I turned my head slightly, pressed my cheek into his palm. "But we didn't." His thumb brushed across my cheekbone. His hand was shaking. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. "How to let someone in without destroying them." "Maybe you don't have to know. Maybe you just... try." He leaned forward, rested his forehead against mine. We stood like that, breathing the same air, holding the same weight. "If you stay," he said quietly, "it doesn't get easier. The danger doesn't disappear. The violence doesn't stop." "I know. You'll see things that will keep you awake at night." "Probably. And one day you might look at me the way she did, like I'm the monster they said I was." I pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "Or maybe one day you'll realize you're not." Something cracked in his expression, something that looked like hope trying to remember how to exist. He kissed me. Soft. Careful. Like I was something precious he didn't know how to hold without breaking. I kissed him back. Tasted salt. Blood or tears, I couldn't tell. Felt the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand tightened in my hair like he was afraid I'd change my mind. When we pulled apart, he was breathing hard. "I can't promise safety," he said. "I'm not asking for it. I can't promise normal. I don't want normal." "Then what do you want?" I thought about it. About Kiara sleeping in my bed. About the gun still on the desk in the study. About the choice I'd already made the moment I decided to stay instead of run. "I want..." "Mornings in the garden," I said. I want to help her find her voice, whatever that looks like. I want to know that when you leave, you're coming back. I paused. And I want you to let me choose this. Every day. Not because I'm trapped or afraid or obligated, but because I want to. He studied my face like he was memorizing it. You're either very brave or very foolish. Can't I be both? He almost smiled. Almost. Then he pulled me close, wrapped his arms around me, and held on like I was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. Later, I checked on Kiara. She was awake, sitting up in bed, staring at her phone. When she saw me, she typed quickly, "Is he okay?" "He's okay." "Are you?" "Getting there." She hesitated, then typed, "You're staying?" I sat on the edge of the bed. "If you want me to." She didn't type anything, just threw her arms around my neck and held on tight. And in that moment, I knew. This strange, broken, dangerous family. It was mine now, too. Spring came slowly to the estate. It had been 3 months since the night the Volkovs came. 3 months since I'd fired a gun with shaking hands and chosen to stay in a world I didn't fully understand. 3 months of learning how to exist in the spaces between violence and tenderness, danger and domesticity. The garden was different now. Kiara and I had planted herbs along the stone wall. Basil, rosemary, thyme. She'd drawn the plans in her sketchbook first, measuring sunlight and shadow with the same precision she applied to everything. We worked in comfortable silence, our hands in the dirt, the smell of earth and growing things replacing the memory of gunpowder. Luca watched us sometimes from the study window. I'd look up and see him there, perfectly still, and I couldn't read his expression. But he never looked away. On a Tuesday morning, warm and bright, Kiara and I were deadheading the roses when she stopped suddenly. I looked over. She was staring at her hands, covered in soil, and something in her face had shifted. "Kiara?" She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, and then, so quietly I almost missed it, "Elena." The sound was raw, rusty, like a door opening after years of being locked. My breath caught. She said it again, stronger this time. "Elena." I dropped the pruning shears and pulled her into my arms. She was shaking, laughing and crying at the same time, and I realized I was too. "Again," I whispered. "Say it again." "Elena." Her voice cracked. "Elena. Elena." Like a prayer, like a spell breaking. Luca was in a meeting when it happened. Valentina found him in the study with 3 men in expensive suits, conducting business I'd learned not to ask about. She interrupted anyway. "You need to come to the garden," she said. "Now." He must have heard something in her voice because he stood immediately, left the men mid-sentence, and followed her outside. Kiara was sitting on the stone bench, me beside her, holding her hand. When she saw her father, she stood. "Papa," she said. The word hung in the air like light. Luca stopped walking. Just stopped. Frozen mid-step, like someone had reached into his chest and stopped his heart. "Papa," Kiara said again, and this time her voice was steadier. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't say it before. I'm sorry I was scared. I'm sorry." He closed the distance in 3 strides and dropped to his knees in front of her. She threw her arms around his neck. "Ti amo," she whispered into his shoulder. "Ti amo, ti amo, ti amo." "I love you." His shoulders shook. No sound, but his whole body trembled with the force of something finally breaking free. When he pulled back, there were tears on his face, the first I'd ever seen. "Mia piccola," he whispered, touching her face like she was made of light. "Mia voce." My little one. My voice. She smiled, tremulous, uncertain, but real. "I remember what they said," she told him, and her voice was small but clear. about what you've done, who you are. And I was scared because I loved you and didn't know if I was allowed to." "You're allowed," he said roughly. "Always, no matter what." "But how can I love someone who's hurt people?" He was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "I don't know," he said finally. "I don't know how you do it. But if you still can, then maybe I'm not as lost as I thought." She hugged him again, and this time when she spoke, her voice was stronger. "You're not lost, Papa. You're just scared. Like I was." He looked at her, this small, fierce girl who'd survived silence and found her way back, and nodded. "Like you were," he agreed softly. That night, the three of us had dinner together. Not in the formal dining room with the long table and crystal. In the kitchen, at the small table by the window where Maria kneaded bread and Valentina drank her morning espresso. Chiara talked. Not constantly. Her voice still tired easily, still felt unfamiliar in her mouth. But she talked. About her drawing, about the book she was reading, about wanting to learn piano again. "I stopped after Mama died," she said, picking at her pasta. "Everything felt too loud without her. But maybe," she glanced at me, "maybe Elena could learn too, so I'm not alone." "I don't know anything about piano," I said. "Neither do I anymore." She smiled. "We can be terrible together." Luca watched us across the table, and something in his face was different. Softer. Less like stone and more like skin. After dinner, Chiara went to bed early. Talking was exhausting, she'd said. Luca and I stood in the kitchen, washing dishes in comfortable silence. "Thank you," he said finally. "For what?" "For staying. For being patient. For..." He set down the dish he was holding. "For seeing her, really seeing her, when I'd stopped knowing how." "You never stopped," I said. "You were just scared. Like she was." He turned to face me, leaned against the counter. "And you? Are you scared?" I thought about it. About the gun still locked in his desk drawer. About the meetings he took in closed rooms. About the men who came and went, shadows in expensive suits. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But less than I expected." "Why?" "Because I know what matters to you, and what you'd do to protect it." I stepped closer. "And because I think you're learning that protecting something doesn't mean locking it away." He pulled me close, kissed the top of my head. "I don't know how this ends, Elena." "Neither do I said. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe we don't need to know." We stood there in the quiet kitchen, holding each other, while somewhere upstairs Chiara slept peacefully for the first time in years. Outside, the garden grew in the darkness. Roots deepening. Flowers opening toward light they couldn't see yet, but trusted would come. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't safe. But it was ours. And for now, that was enough.